Hello and greetings. Flint is a functional and unassuming Welsh town on the A548 coast road, just over the border from England. Many tourists pass through on their way to places such as Prestatyn and Rhyl. Some may stop off at one of the supermarkets or maybe even one of the takeaways. Few will realise that something stunning and historically important lies just out of their sight at the far side of the railway line. Today, we're going to explore Flint Castle. Ever since the Norman Conquest of 1066, the kings of England have struggled to gain the control over Wales that they claimed. Wales remained a loose collection of regions ruled by princes who were as often at war with each other as with the English. The wild terrain made it an inhospitable place, but perfect for the guerrilla tactics the Welsh employed, typically attacking, then melting into the mist and mountains. After being crowned King of England in 1274, Edward I, also known as Longshanks, soon gained ambition to conquer Wales. He has been described as temperamental and was of quite some height. He was naturally intimidating and instilled fear in his contemporaries. After a successful campaign, he subjected Wales to English rule. He built a series of castles and towns in the countryside and settled them with English people. Work on the first of these began in 1277 at a rocky outcrop on the estuary of the River Dee. This was the beginnings of both Flint Castle and Flint Town. When completed, Flint Castle directly linked to Flint Town, which was a settlement reserved exclusively for English residents and was defined by a ditch. Flint Castle was the first of a chain of castles built by Edward, known today as the Iron Ring. Other castles in the chain include those at Rhuddlan, Conwy, Caernarfon, Harlech and Beaumaris. The location of Flint Castle was carefully chosen, a comfortable one-day march from the city of Chester by land, also a comfortable one-day march from Edward's next castle at Rhuddlan. At high tide, the Dee estuary was capable of flooding the tidal moat at Flint Castle. This meant that it could also be reached by sailing ship from Chester, the Wirral and the open sea. Yet at low tide, back in the 1200s, the waters were shallow enough that it was possible to walk across the Dee estuary to the Wirral. Flint Castle has a feature which is unique in the British Isles. The castle is typically square-shaped, with a tower in each corner. 3 of the towers are an integral part of the castle. However, the 4th tower, the northeast tower, is built separate from the main castle. Access was via a drawbridge across the moat. It's called a donjon. The purpose was that if the castle was stormed, the residents could retreat to the relative safety of the donjon. Heavily constructed, the walls are a massive 16 feet or 3 metres thick, and even thicker at the base. The donjon was intended to be an impenetrable place of refuge, of safety. Whilst unique in the British Isles, the donjon is a feature of several castles in France. We know that Edward had many links with France, not least his own family, the Plantagenets, who ruled over England from 1154 to 1485. The House of Plantagenet originated from the lands of Anjou in France. Edward married twice, firstly to Eleanor of Castile and then to Margaret of France. We also know that Edward spent much time in France, and it is likely that he stayed at one or more French castles with donjons. It should come as no surprise, then, that Edward employed Richard l'Ingénieur and later Master James of St. George, who originated from Savoy, to oversee construction of Flint Castle. Construction of Flint Castle commenced in 1277. The scale of the construction work was enormous, partly because the work wasn't restricted just to the castle, but also to the creation of the connected town of Flint. At the height of works, there were almost 3,000 labourers employed, including masons, carpenters, diggers, and woodcutters. If you look closely at the walls of the castle, it is apparent that there is a mixture of sandstones. The yellow stonework would have been quarried locally. The distinctive red sandstone would have been brought from the far side of the River Dee on the Wirral. In 1282, the castle was besieged by the Welsh as part of an attempted uprising against the English crown. Then, in 1294, another attempt was made to seize the castle. This time, the English constable deliberately burned the fortress and the attached town of Flint to prevent capture by the Welsh. Following this, extensive repairs were made and a relatively quiet, peaceful era arrived. In 1399, King Richard II was staying at Flint Castle when Henry Bolingbroke arrived and forced Richard to abdicate, allowing Henry to take his place as King of England. The last significant action at Flint Castle was during the English Civil War, during which the castle saw much significant action. Following this, it was ordered by Oliver Cromwell in 1647 that the castle should be slighted to ensure that it could never again be used for military purposes. The result of this destruction is pretty similar to what we see today. At the time of being slighted, Flint Castle was described as being almost buried in its own ruins. The castle remained abandoned, and no attempts were made to either repair or reconstruct it. Indeed, much of the stonework has been plundered over several hundred years, often being used in other construction projects locally. Flint Castle has now been managed as a public monument for over 100 years and is currently maintained by Cadw. Today, it is a great place to spend an hour. The donjon still has some elevated walkways and even a dark, stone-vaulted circular gallery running around the base. In 2019, Cadw added something to the northeast tower. On entering the tower, there is now this wonderful spiral staircase which it is possible to climb. On reaching the top, the views are simply breathtaking. We can see across the town of Flint, down the estuary towards the Flintshire Bridge. We can see the Wirral coast, from Neston to the Hilborough Islands, and we can even see the wind farm turbines out at sea. If you'd like to visit Flint Castle for yourself, then the castle is open daily for the public to explore. Amazingly, it's free of charge to enter. It is unattended and the gates are normally locked around about dusk when it starts coming dark. The castle is only a short walk from bus stops and Flint railway station. There are 2 car parks. Unfortunately, at these there is a charge payable. If visiting by car, then Flint Castle is signposted from the main A548 in Flint, right beside the Aldi supermarket. I hope that you've enjoyed watching this video as much as I've enjoyed visiting the castle and making the video. I'm not a professional historian, I simply enjoy discovering and learning about the world, whether local to Flintshire, the northwest of England, or further afield. I've done my best to research the facts and I hope that they are accurate. I'd love to read your comments and I'd like to improve my work as this channel grows. Meanwhile, thanks for watching and have a grand tour!